Hello and welcome to Say Hi to the Future, Ingenious Thinkers, a podcast aimed at highlighting the human side of ingenuity. My name is Ken Tenser, curator of Say Hi to the Future, helping leaders think differently in the face of uncertainty and ambiguity. Better thinking, better outcomes. With me today is Kerryn Fewster, founder and director at AdapiQ Minds, developer of the I Am tool that assists individuals and teams embrace ambiguity. Like this video if you enjoy our show and subscribe to our channel. Leave us a comment with who we should interview next. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. Kerryn Fewster, welcome to Say Hi to the Future.
Thank you so much. I'm absolutely delighted to be here.
So today we're going to be talking a lot about ambiguity and uncertainty, which, that's obviously a lot of what we do around human ingenuity. But what is it? Tell us what ambiguity is and what ambiguity and certainty are actually.
Sure. So ambiguity is really essentially, we haven't seen this before. It's unfamiliar, unknown. I don't have previous learnings I can lean on to go back and work out how to solve a problem. It's essentially what other people might say or experience a chaotic or very messy feeling. It feels like there's a heavy fog. I just can't find my pathway forward. Whereas uncertainty, I'm uncertain of the answer. Uncertainty is something we can normally hold on to a little bit tighter. We can take steps to try and resolve the lack of certainty. We can use previous learnings. We can take in different pieces of data. Whereas ambiguity, we often don't even know where to start because it feels so foreign and unfamiliar to us. So they both have fairly significant impacts on us, the way we're feeling, our productivity, but they are slightly different.
So, today, I think we have quite a bit of both, and they've really come to the vogue. But you've been studying, you've been working with us for quite a few years. How did you get involved or attuned to this issue within individuals and then resultingly in corporations?
Yeah. So I'm always a bit curious around. I love change. So having said that, I do ask every large group I'm with who here loves change, and everyone puts their hand up when you move forward to ambiguity and uncertainty. People still think they do, but our data and research doesn't tell us that they're effective in that space. So winding back was probably, oh goodness, maybe 8 years or so ago now. The company, the sort of work that we were doing was in purest change management, where you would develop a change plan, a training plan, a comms plan, engagement plan, etc. And I remember it would have been 2015, 2016, working with a particular client who was under significant change. They were bringing a number of brands in under a single brand. They were relocating hundreds of their employees out of very well-established pockets around the city into a single location. There was restructuring going on. There was a significant amount of change. And the change plans just weren't sticking. They just weren't doing what we needed. They were not moving people forward. Their resistance level remained high, etc. But coupled with that was, Industry 4.0 was coming along. Globalization was just the way we do things. The relationship between the employer and the employee had started to change more into a partnership, something that we negotiate as opposed to, I'll be grateful forever for having a job. So there's a lot of change going on. And one particular area of the business we were working with, what I noticed in particular was that the leader was almost doubling down, write more change plans, do another engagement survey, do this, do that. And it just wasn't going to help. And the real reason being is that it wasn't the change, it was the incredible amount of uncertainty and in many ways ambiguity. They had never done what they were trying to tackle before. And this particular leader I was working with, his health suffered terribly. He became increasingly stressed, increasingly difficult to work with because it was just like, do this and do it more. And I just got curious and went, this cannot simply be develop another change plan because the world is now too different and people are operating and responding to it quite differently. So that's where it started. with a number of different clients, just noticing we've always been able to change. We've been doing it since the day we, arrived on this planet. We can adapt and change as humans. It was the pace, the complexity, the volume, everything that was coming at people that I was saying, I'm tapping out. This is all a bit too hard for me now.
And so when you go through these exercises, do you find people open to the fact that they may be not willing to accept ambiguous situations? Like what's a reaction like?
Yeah. So when we first so we developed an assessment tool called the Indicator of Ambiguity with a local university here in Australia. And initially we called the assessment Embrace It, Build Your Tolerance for Ambiguity. That's what we called it. And so that triggers a message in your mind to say, oh, I should be tolerant of ambiguity. So when I ask people, how tolerant are you? Do you like to be in that space? Most people say yes, that they do. But our research indicated that it's only around about 10% of people who are comfortable sitting in ambiguity and uncertainty. And it's because of how we've been, who we are. Our brains are not wired to say, go forth, try that risk, do something different, put yourself out of your comfort zone. Our brains are wired to keep us safe, to protect us, to minimize the additional thinking we need to do. So put us into a routine and a scheduled pattern of behavior. But our world now says, actually, that's nice, and that's okay for some parts of our world. But the real opportunity is to work out how you can get comfortable with all of this ambiguity, so you can still think, breathe, operate, engage, live. Because I worry that those that don't get at least curious about it are potentially left behind.
So we get curious about it. I mean, one for me, and I know you do a lot of keynotes as well. For me, I always start with the notion that there never has been a box to think inside or outside of. That these are just things that we have done over time to make ourselves feel comfortable, and that we have to remove that and understand that we figured out a long time ago the world isn't flat; it's round. It keeps going around. And every time you go around it, you're going to see something new or experience something new. Doesn't that have to start at the top of an organization? Like, what do you need to do to embrace that? Because for me, if I'm a team member and I've become open-minded, if I become more comfortable, and I'm still working within a box outside of standard operating procedures, got it. I'm not really moving anywhere.
I agree. I absolutely agree. The vast majority of our work starts with executives because it has to. It's just simply the fact that they cast a significant shadow. So do you want your shadow to be one that lets light through, or it's just all dark, which is we're going to continue to do things the way we've always done things? I absolutely also believe that people make decisions. Like if you find yourself in an organization with a leader that is, just not open to getting comfortable or encouraging comfort in the discomfort of uncertainty, or if they say it's okay to fail as long as you learn, but they don't really believe it and they don't really endorse that sort of behavior, you work that out pretty quickly that this is not going to be the best place for you to be. And I mentioned earlier, I think certainly here in Australia, post the pandemic, I shouldn't really probably say post, but at this stage of the pandemic, as we're all recovering,
Yeah,
the whole makeup of hybrid work and how we go back to work is a big conversation. And I think that the leaders who are able to embrace the fact that, in my view, we're not going back to how it really was, very structured, 5 days a week, and in your cubicle, etc. And whilst I guess we've always had a little bit of flexibility, I am a firm believer that those leaders who can demonstrate trust, because that feels like that's one of the paramount requirements to be able to lead a hybrid workplace. If those who can demonstrate trust and encourage people to operate in a new way, have new ways of working, I think they're the sustainable leaders moving forward, and they'll bring the best out in people, and we'll find them. We'll navigate our way forward to find the leaders that bring out the best in ourselves, I think.
And so with those leaders, I mean, there's so many different problems you can be facing. I mean, we go from tame to complex to wicked, like the whole range of them. Some have ambiguity and some have, we'll call it, a very low to no level of ambiguity. So how do people start to understand what they're facing? What type of problem, when to click into this mode and when to say, no, it's just a binary
Yeah, yeah,
decision.
yeah.
How do we manage that?
Oh, I I believe that we know pretty quickly when we're in a very different circumstance. Our bodies tell us, our emotions tell us. We feel that we're in a place that is unfamiliar and that we're not used to being in. When you start to feel that angst, that discomfort, that uncertainty, that's the time to first and initially take that deep breath and sit back and think about what is it that I need to make sure that I'm the mindset I need to be in, so that I can look at the problem in its fullness, not try to rush to an easy and straightforward solution just because I want it to go away or it looks too hard or I feel overwhelmed by it. We very much need to be in a position where we are sitting with it and getting ourselves as calm and present as possible before we start to, march our way forward. Otherwise, we can waste an enormous amount of time from trying to solve a new and complex problem with our old way of thinking or our comfortable way of thinking and operating. So I think we need to make sure that we are definitely in a situation where the time is taken to say, this is something new to us, such as a pandemic. I mean, I know it's just the best example because the world responded so incredibly rapidly to something
Mhm.
that was entirely unfamiliar. And so it demonstrates we've got the capacity and capability to do that. It's just we prefer not to. So when we're back in our workplace, which feels calmer and feels a little more stable, I don't want to invite all that uncertainty in. I just don't want
Right.
to. So I choose not to.
And so, with the assessment, with indicator of ambiguity, you're measuring on multiple levels. So, can you tell us a little bit about that and what you're looking for with each?
Sure. So the research was essentially, the question was with our research team, why is it that some people are comfortable with ambiguity and can seemingly move forward, whereas others get stuck and get left behind? So the research that was undertaken identified essentially three areas that we measure against. The first one is comfort with ambiguity, which is essentially how I feel about it. And it's a work-based tool. I should be very clear about this. It's not whole of life. So when I'm faced with uncertain, unfamiliar, new situations at work, how do I respond? What's my feeling towards it? The second dimension is your desire for challenging work. What's my comfort around the risk taking? Am I looking for work that pushes me outside of a standard and routine based environment? How do I deal with complexity in that space? What's my response to a wicked problem, for example?
Hmm.
And then the third area is managing the uncertainty. So what do I do? What's my tools, my techniques, my approach when I'm faced with all this level of uncertainty in the workplace? How do I act and how do I lead myself and how do I lead others through it? So they're the three main dimensions, of which there's a number of elements which are subsets and measured underneath.
Right.
There's an overall compass. We call it the compass, which is what the report looks like. And the compass title comes from, having a compass to navigate your way through the ambiguity.
Hmm.
So the measurement goes against those three areas, and then there's an overall measurement against the benchmarking group. And what was interesting for me is, and we'll use the Likert scale of very mild through to very clear. So my results in comfort with ambiguity and desire for challenging work were clear to very clear. And I was definitely expecting managing the uncertainty to be clear to very clear. But as it came out, my results were quite down towards the mild end. And I remember thinking, well, this can't be right. I've been working in change all my life. It just can't quite be the right data or results. But what was interesting is when I went back and spoke to my team about it, they said, absolutely, that's the case. You're so comfortable with uncertainty and ambiguity. you so much like to do things differently, and you resist routine, and you always want to try different things. But to manage it, because you're so comfortable with it, you don't necessarily even notice the impact on other people around you. So it was a little bit like a free intervention, free coaching from my team. And, if you're entrepreneurial, if you're working in a startup, that sort of results is not unusual to have that. Whereas I'm comfortable, give me something new, we'll deal with the details and how to manage it later. Whereas ideally, the first two dimensions are both positively and negatively correlated with effectiveness. Whereas the third one, managing the uncertainty, is only a positive way of operating. Because if you've got too much of the other two without enough of the third dimension, it can be quite a challenging place to work, which is what I found out about my own personal leadership style, which was interesting and unexpected.
So in listening to that, I'm wondering, just on a very pragmatic level, I take the assessment and I go in believing that I'm very comfortable with uncertainty, but it doesn't mean I react well to it at work necessarily. Like, I'm presented with uncertainty, but at work I become Forrest Gump and I just start running. Can you save me, Kerryn? What is the outcome here? That can you bring that learning or application, to who I am and to my assessment numbers, or to at least managing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I quite like the Forrest Gump analogy. It's Forrest Gump or it's head in the sand. It's like, no, that can't be true. That's not me. So, like any assessment, this is a self-assessment. It's got various factors incorporated into it to ensure that if the person has over or underreported their behaviours because of a social desirability bias, that is, we can see that. So that's a good tangible piece of data to provide to the individual. But essentially, the report is linked to a number of skills as well to build your tolerance for ambiguity across the individual dimensions and elements. The interesting part was that the primary style to focus on, or skill, sorry, is around mindfulness. And so mindfulness being just to take that breath, take the moment, still the noise around you, be very, very present, get as focused as you can on what is happening. Don't take off like Forrest Gump. Don't start digging the hole to put your head in. Just sit with it and try and work out what's happening right here, right now. And then the second most highly correlated, there's 8 skills in total. The second most highly correlated skill is creativity. And of course, linked to, how do I think differently about this new problem? I haven't seen this before. I can't just use the same hammer because the nail's different. I have to do it very differently. And then there's a number of other skills, including courageousness, curiosity, assertiveness, finding focus, flexible thinking, those sort of areas where the individual is really asked to sort of tap into skills that we almost had when we were little at school and got beaten out of us somewhere through the education system as we age. But at no stage were any of the skills about develop another Gantt chart. Nothing like that from that perspective. Certainly finding focus and making sure you're doing, impacting the areas you can impact. But the idea of, the reams of paper and reporting, etc., that wasn't going to move the dial for the individuals in terms of how I feel. Because the first response is an emotional response, generally speaking. And it is also generally one that we consider to be a negative emotion, even though all emotions are there to send us a message. This negative emotion feels like fear, and we don't like it. And it makes us nervous, unhappy, angry, terrified, a lot of different emotions that we don't want to experience. So we run or we bury our head. But I believe, and it's a little bit tough to say maybe, but I believe that people's relevance in the workplace is significantly impacted by their desire to gain comfort and tolerance with ambiguity, because I'm almost positive it's not going away.
I think that's a reasonable assumption. That it's
Yes.
not going away. I think we can work with that. When you apply this, though, to, let's say, team building or team construction, if you will, is this a generalized skill? Like if we're in infrastructure, I mean, certainly we can be
Mm.
creative and imagine a new infrastructure or a new urban approach to urban planning. But if the bridge is a millimeter off, shouldn't we be really nervous? Like, aren't there members of
Yes.
the team that we don't want this to apply to?
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, I don't want the bridge to be millimeter off. I definitely don't want that. So there are different roles that don't require the same degree of tolerance to ambiguity. Absolutely. And generally speaking, because it's mindset and our work is often around influencing at leadership, we do want our top tiers to have this tolerance,
Mhm.
to be able to adapt, and demonstrate agility. There are most certainly roles where, like, I don't want, for example, if I need a brain surgery, I don't want my brain surgeon to get in there and go, oh, well, that looks interesting. Oh, I'm curious about that. I might just poke around there. No, no, go in, do your job, sign me up and let me go. So absolutely, there's roles that don't require high levels of.
Mhm.
I'm going to use the. I think everyone needs to be able to tolerate it because there's so few things we can control. Does everybody need to have a desire for challenging work? Absolutely not. And but that tolerance, if you even think about, for some people, ambiguity is a restructure. Even though we've been doing it since, day dot,
Mhm.
the uncertainty can be overwhelming and get me to a point where I feel I don't know which way to go. I don't know who to talk to. I don't know who my new leader is. I don't know why my role's changing, all these things. And that can be a sense of where people get incredibly overwhelmed, stressed, anxious, stuck. And when they're there, if they had some of the skills around take that deep breath, just collect your thoughts, get curious rather than get judgmental, assert yourself in to find out the answers you need, as opposed to taking on a position of nobody told me, so I don't know anything. I think that's I think that's useful worldwide, all levels. But you are right that we do want the bridge to be accurate. So not everybody needs to have a desire for
Right.
challenging work and high risk tolerance.
I think it is interesting, though, and as you describe it and we discuss it, that one of the key characteristics will be our ability to internalize how to deal with ambiguity and how to
Mm.
rationalize uncertainty. That seems to be a pretty directed point, if I'm hearing it correctly.
Absolutely. I believe it's like one of those evergreen skills that it will be forever of value. At certain times, it'll be crucial. Other times, it'll be nice to have. But it's not something that's a luxury item to think, oh, I might add this to my toolkit. I don't think
Mhm.
so. I think there's other skills that I get astounded that seem to not exist. Like I believe there's a profound lack of curiosity in leaders across the world, where uh, having the answer is a skill, most certainly. Asking the question is a skill, most certainly. So we just need to keep on working at that way of it's okay that if I don't have all the answers, it's okay if ambiguity overwhelms me. Let's just equip ourselves, however, with some ways, as you say, when we internalize it, how do I respond to it so I don't get either ran past or ran over? Because that is quite a possible outcome if I don't find a way to be more comfortable in this world. Because as we've said, and I know the term VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity has been around for some 40 odd years now. And I
Right.
wonder when it was coined, if we thought that, we'd be living existing now, and what will our world look like in another 40 years' time? So these are some of the skills that that they're not going away. I see it as fundamental as learn to be a good communicator. that's not an option if you want to be in the workplace.
Right, right. And what I hear from CEOs so often now is I just long for 90 days of certainty.
Yeah. Yes.
We're okay with some ambiguity, we're okay with some uncertainty, but boy, if I could just get 90 days locked into my supply chain or my revenue forecast without everything flipping upside down, whether it's currency or markets or viruses or whatnot. How do we,
Absolutely.
you know, this can't be an individual person's sport. I mean, I know that the CEO ultimately there's a yes or no that ultimately lays on somebody's shoulders, but how do you build this into an organization so that it's not just always being dumped as this mammoth problem or challenge?
And I think that's the key. I think that's absolutely right, that we accept that our 90-day certainty is highly unlikely, that we accept that we move towards clarity over certainty. What can I be clear about over the next 90 days? I can't be certain, but I can be clear that our intentions are to communicate on this particular day, to announce the acquisition on day 47, to not adapt the structure until day 83, something. These are our intentions. We can be clear about that. It needs to be embedded into our cultures, our ways of working, our conversations, that letting go of the fact that that straight line between A and B, it exists in some parts of our workplaces, but the vast majority, if you are in a market of consolidation, you mentioned supply chains. I mean, goodness, I don't know about in Canada, but certainly we're still having impacts down here in Australia
Right. Yeah.
of products that we just still can't access. And the complexity of what they've had to deal with, everything aside from the pandemic, as you say, the currencies, just the work ethics, the different ways we go about doing things, they're not going to get that 90 days of, I'm absolutely certain that's going to happen. Because the fact is, other than the sun coming up and going down and death and taxes, as they say, not too much is certain. But there's a great deal of satisfaction that can be gained from an organisation that says, let's go with clarity over certainty. What are we absolutely clear about? Let's make sure we're communicating as frequently as possible in as many ways as we possibly can. Let's ensure that we are an organisation that says, this is new to us. Get a diverse group of people in. Don't just say, oh, well, we're at the top here and therefore we'll be able to solve the problem. That's just not the case. That whole conversation around ask more questions, listen more than what you actually speak. I think that leaders and organisations have a wonderful opportunity to create that way of working. It's definitely not easy. There'll be pockets where it will start. Maybe it's even a little bit like when those innovation hubs sort of started, I don't know, when was that, 90s, early 2000s, and they were sort of peeled off to the side to create something new. Maybe we need to have a whole lot of little hubs that get started until it just becomes the way we do things. I think increasingly CEOs and executives appreciate that being the smartest in the room is just not enough, that we need to be able to do things differently. So as long as we can get enough people recognizing that and curious about a different way of doing things, I think we've got a good chance of changing cultures. I'm an optimist, though.
Kerryn, it's amazing how the time goes because I mean we're nearly at the end, and it's been fascinating. I mean, I think we both are in the sort of same school of thought and related schools of thought. So it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. And just before we close off, one last question for you. I mean, we've heard that, I think you just said the biggest and smartest in the room is not always or not necessarily the most important. You've said, I remember these things. You've said the only certainty we can have in the next 90 days is uncertainty. I'm a CEO. This is the end of your keynote. I'm in tears, Kerryn. I'm on the floor. I'm in tears. Talk me out of it. What are you bringing to me here? That is because it is critical. What you're doing is critical. Your assessment is, what is the upside? What do I need to do to get off the floor and be productive?
The upside is that you are the leader that's going to be able to find a way to navigate forward. You are the one that, when you develop some skills in that space and recognize that this is a moment in time, it's a data point. It's not a birthmark. You can adapt, you can change. So once you realize you can do that, and that if you look at your competitors across the market and you're one of 10 and 9 are really struggling, then there's the first to market advantage. You can adapt and you can learn to not only tolerate ambiguity but absolutely make it an opportunity for you. And so I think that the other thing I would say to that leader on the floor, as I'm over there mopping their brow and saying sorry, is that the reality is that you're so much better at change than what you think you are. You have continually changed and adapted and grown and learned and tried and failed. You've been doing this forever. It's just now the world's decided we need to be really, really good at it because we're on incredible pace and incredible complexity. So what you've been doing for the last 20 years, we're just going to squash it together. And so we need to be doing that in a shorter period of time and more consistently. So it's not new to you. It's just faster and a little more complex. So I'll try to make them feel better as hopefully they're standing up now. They're off the floor, hopefully.
Kerryn, I think that was a wonderful way to end it. I think, yes, absolutely. You brought us off the floor. You've given us hope now and a full understanding. I think the other reality is that for CEOs who understand the importance of what you're measuring, they understand the importance of what you're bringing to teams, that is a true competitive advantage. I mean, at least in the short run, to step up and say, no, we are going to be good at this. We're going to be bold about what we're doing.
Absolutely. As I said, the alternative is, if it's not you, it's your competitor. So why not you? If you accept some elements, which is, we're not going back, ambiguity is here to stay, we are continually moving at faster pace with more complexity. If you accept that they're facts rather than ideas, then you would, by necessity, you have to develop a different way of operating. So it is that competitive advantage. And having some data points, having knowledge. Most people are very, very intrigued by data about themselves. Some don't. Well, people don't like it sometimes, and that's okay. It's just a matter of saying, I've got a starting point. Let me at least get a little bit curious about this, because throwing it in the bin is, doesn't help anyone, and it probably means you're either Forrest Gump or you're digging your hole. So one or the other.
Kerryn Fewster, Adaptive Minds, coming to us from Brisbane, Australia. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. I really, really enjoyed that conversation. It was great.
Thanks.